Welcome to In Front of Ira.
With Sabrina.
And Torsten.
Two historians.
And friends.
And lovers.
Of romantic comedies.
And this is the answer. This is
the answer to the age-old question, who has the better Stanley Cup?
Yes. I feel like we should just keep this because this internet...
Not sponsored. We are not sponsored.
No, this is the answer to the podcast.
This is the answer to the age-old podcast.
This is the answer to the question of the age-old podcast. Anyway, you know what I was going to say.
Just in case that completely derailed you, we're Sabrina and Torsten. This is In Front of Ira, and today we are doing...
My Best Friend's Wedding from 1997. It's directed and written by people you don't know.
I wrote this down. Hold on.
I wrote this down too. Directed by P.J. Hogan and written by Ronald Bass. But like, if you look, so if you look this up, so I think they're both Australian, or the P.J. Hogan is Australian.
It sounds Australian.
I think the most notable thing he also directed is Muriel's Wedding. So he apparently
just does weddings.
Yeah, he does weddings. And Ronald Bass, interesting enough, wrote, among other things, Rain Man. So he actually won an Academy Award for Rain Man, which we're not going to get into what the problem with Rain Man is right now. And the other thing is a film we might actually end up doing at some point before we go with Chris Evans, that Chris Evans also directed, which is a fairly recent indie rom-com.
I've not heard about this.
It's cute. Like I've seen it once, but like anyway, so it's not the only time he's done some kind of rom-com, but that it's way less like, I want to say, like zany than My Best Friend's Wedding.
Yeah, this is a quite I don't know, shall we say it's not controversial. Controversial is the wrong word, but it's kind of a non-standard rom-com. So,
yeah, for some reasons, I guess. Yeah. I mean,
should we just start by saying what it is, right? Yeah,
so the conceit is, and I think I still, like, now that I'm almost 35, a lot of this hinges on the fact that, so, Julia Roberts' character is 28 years old. She is somehow a very successful food critic. Like, we start out with her, like, you know, being a food critic in a fancy restaurant. I want to say
have my issues
New
with
York,
this scene, but we'll get into that.
I forget where she's in the beginning.
Because there's a throwaway comment that the mom makes when they're running over the meadow in the end.
And I guess she mentions briefly she was on a book tour, so I guess she also wrote like a book of some sort, food related. And so she's a fancy career businesswoman, as these people tend to be in these films, even though food critic is a bit, I mean, food comes up in rom-com, so that's not completely out of the ordinary. And her love interest is her best friend, Dermot Mulroney, who's I think around her age. Like they're the same age. They grew sort of like
that's the whole
went
point,
to college together, and and he's a sports reporter, but like not a fancy bigwig. Mostly the kind of nitty gritty, going to the small games, college football, I think, kind of thing, or baseball. Sorry, not football, just baseball, or both. Baseball plays a role in the film at some point, and. Yeah, they have the usual pact of, like, if we're not married by the time, we will get in touch, which happens to be, for some reason, the age 28 moment.
This is the weirdest thing to me in this. Yeah. And I know we texted about this, and you meant, like, oh, yeah, it's the casting, Julia Roberts is 20. Julia Roberts is 30 in this. This makes no sense at all. Like, why not just 30? Like, you could just call it 30.
I don't know. And... maybe they wanted to have less of an age difference with Cameron Diaz. I think now that the Gen Z Puritans will freak out because Cameron Diaz's character, who is the woman that Dermot Mulroney then met with, is like, what, 20, 21?
She's 20, but also 20, like you just age her up 4 years. Like that's not like it doesn't need to be 28.
I don't know how old Cameron Diaz is when she might actually be just
that's a good
20.
point, yeah. But also I don't know, like She doesn't look like she can only play 20. Like, if they sold her as
Yeah.
24, I would buy it as well.
I would have put it by 2. Anyway, I think it does matter that she's younger, because then Julia Roberts can sort of feel like she's, she's older and we have all this history. I'm older, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, so she kind of expects, this call from her best friend to maybe...
in 1997, okay. FYI.
Yeah,
so, like, it's not necessary.
I think it's supposed to play a role that Cameron Diaz's character at some point announces she would drop out of college after the wedding and all of this stuff. But, But yeah, anyway, like, she gets a call from a best friend who she hasn't seen in a while because she was a busy career woman, and then expects maybe this call will be about this pact that they made at some point. No, of course not. It is about him getting married, and it's very short notice because he's already getting married this weekend, so apparently this also got away from under him, which is sort of the impression we also get. And he marries into a very rich family, and she's supposed to be, like, the maid of honor. And
this is all happening, like, 4 days before the wedding, which to me, one of the least real, like we can talk about this movie. One of the least realistic things about this is it's this rich family who are, like, basically Chicago, like, wasps. And, like, they have this giant wedding planned over multiple days. And, like, they don't have stuff like this set. That's so weird.
Yeah, that's definitely weird. But anyway, so at least she gets thrown into this in short notice. She flies to Chicago, but she flies to Chicago with the immediate plan of, like, ruining this because she's suddenly very jealous and is afraid of losing him. And, her gay best friend, Rupert Everett, who I want to praise as, like, the most sane person as a character in this whole film, but also as, like, I think... such a fun performance that he immediately kind of escapes the just gay best friend trope, because he's just such a delight every time he comes up.
Also, like, this is an age when, like, the gay best friend is not quite as much of a trope, right? This is kind of the movie that really jump starts the trope and launches into people's consciousness.
I feel like, I mean, I want to say there's some others in the 90s, but, like, he's one of the most definite ones, and in a really good fun way. And also Rupert Everett being one of the only gay, like, out actors at that time, that is also a difference. I think this is not a portrayal of, like, someone doing an overly camp thing and not really knowing what they're doing with it. It's just Rupert Everett. But yeah, anyway, so she flies to Chicago with the plan to essentially ruin the wedding and win him over. And then chaos obviously ensues.
It's okay. So, like, having said all the things that are wrong with this movie, and there are a few of them. Like, I think probably the reason that they aged Cameron Diaz down is because in the script it said that she's in college. It like, you could have just changed that. Like, that's actually slightly odd to me. But all of these things are just, like, the setup for the thing that is supposed to happen, which is Julia Roberts engages in the ruination of this relationship in kind of like a kind of spy type way, right? She like writes an email at some point that is supposed to, like, break them up. There's a whole, like, kind of nefarious things that she sets up. It's kind of like intrigue, and it's always played so that you kind of buy that she would do this. You don't like that she's doing it, but it's easy enough to see why she's doing it because she also feels bad about doing it. But in the end, she is trying to break them up. So it to me, it always kind of, like, gets very close to that line of, like, oh, I really don't like her, and then she feels bad about it. Something else happens, and we're like, okay, we're pulling it back again. It's kind of a tough balance for the movie.
Yeah, and I think, as so often, it works because it's Julia Roberts, because she's just, like, endearing.
It's such a cheat, right? It's such a cheat past Julia Roberts. But also, it's fine.
I think it's because she clearly feels bad throughout the whole thing, and she at some point comes clean, and she's trying to do the right thing at the end of, like, helping them get back together and, like, undo what she's been trying to do and didn't really ever manage, because clearly these two people do love each other, and she has to come to this realization. I think it also works because basically Rupert Everett keeps telling her it's not gonna work, and she just has to live with it. And I think she slowly needs to come to this realization too. There's obviously always like reasonable moments of doubt of like, oh, is he like, I think it works because clearly there is something between them, and there probably always was something between them, but it's just the one that got away and they didn't find their moment. There's like a lot of reference to the fact that she was sort of emotionally unavailable. Like, you know, she's the problem. For once, the woman is really the problem here. She sort of kept running away from more intimate stuff, like more intimate relationships. She's now at a point where she could do this, but like, yeah, she just missed her moment, and it's tragic in and of itself, but she has to understand that's probably not, like, it's not going to work with this one.
Yeah. I mean, that's her character arc in this movie, is from realizing that she let him get away, and that becomes a thing that she realizes at the beginning of the movie. Then her thinking, oh, I need to fix this. I need to actually get him. This is what's going to fulfill me. This is what's going to fix my life, essentially. And then in the end, coming to the realization that that's not what's meant to happen for her, and being reasonably okay with it, right? Like, that's the whole famous ending scene where they dance, and it's not the typical rom-com ending. So that's, I think, something that we need to talk about.
Yeah, like, I think that is also in weird ways kind of radical, because it's not a heteronormative ending, right? She ends up dancing with her gay best friend and sort of comes to realization that life is going to be okay anyway. That doesn't mean she won't ever meet anyone, but she doesn't have anyone right now, but she can be fulfilled single and with her, like, wonderful gay best friend and other friends, presumably, in her career, and someday it might happen for her, right? Which is interesting, because if you look this up, they did have a different ending. They did have a way more cliche ending where, like, also this being 1997, it's pretty fun, as John Corbett would have come in as, like, this wedding guest she would have met. And John Corbett being the guy who was Aiden on Sex and the City, like, 2 years later. And then also in My Big Fat Greek Wedding, he's the love interest as well. So, but, like, their test audiences hated it. And they loved Rupert Everett. And so they rewrote this to essentially being very non-heteronormative. He surprises her at the wedding. They dance. It's really campy. It's really fun, and it works. And I see why it works. So I'm glad test audiences had some sense.
Yeah, they don't always. The thing that actually made me think at the end, I'm like, well, this movie is actually really honest, because it is in the end about the best friend, right? It used to be. She also says that it used to be Dermot Mulroney, and then when Rupert Everett actually shows up in Chicago, she at first says basically, well, he's now my best friend. Like, we haven't had much contact. And like, that continues being true, right? This movie is very, it's, and this is something that people said at the time. It's probably why it's not as much liked as a bunch of other movies. This is what people have been saying about this movie. It is a departure from the typical movie. I don't think there is any other, like, big Meg Ryan, Julia Roberts, like that kind of era canon rom-com movie that has this kind of ending. They always end up together in some fashion at the end, except for this one. And I think people just, it's different. It's radical. It kind of deconstructs the tropes of the romantic comedy while being one.
Yeah, and because it also still works, like, at some point you do also, like, that is, and I think this is the other radical thing, it's very easy to have the other woman you don't like. Like, we're supposed to, we sort of expect Cameron Diaz to be someone we immediately hate, so it's easier for us to think, oh, of course her and, like, Dermot Mulroney don't fit together, she's wrong for him, they need to break up, so, sort of like You've Got Mail, they're clearly dating wrong people, which might not, either it's a terrible person, or it's at least clearly the wrong person for this dude. Neither of which is the case. Like, at first we get the idea she's sort of, okay, she might be the blonde, like, she's way too young
ditzy,
and blonde, and
yeah.
then the ditzy kind of thing. She has very ditzy cousins we need to talk about it. But, like, she's just not. And at some point you do also root for her. Like, you start sort of to thinking, like, okay, you know, why does she deserve to have her marriage ruined?
Yeah, I basically, you know? For me, because I looked at this movie structurally, because, like, things happen, like, this is not, for all the departure from form. It's not a departure in terms of structure. It is super classically structured. And what kind of kicks the second act into gear is the moment when they're at the karaoke bar and Cameron Diaz actually doesn't want to sing and then kind of like gets goaded into singing, and then she sings and she's horrible at it. And Julia Roberts' character at first thinks like, oh, now he sees like this is, not the part. She's horrible at it. She keeps doing it. Everybody keeps cheering for her. And like you just see Julia Roberts' character sitting there going like, oh, so people like this. He likes this. She's willing to do this. And that's the moment where you kind of decide, wait, I'm supposed to not like her, but like I kind of love her. So what's the movie going to do now?
Julia Roberts also likes her. Like she admits this at some point. It's like she starts to like her also in that very moment because she sets her up. She knows she hates to do karaoke. She puts her on the list. She wants to humiliate her.
She is the bad guy, as she says at the end.
Spectacularly. And everything she's trying to do is the thing. And you also kind of think, oh, Cameron Diaz is going to be this naive little thing and she's not going to see through her. She sees through her pretty clearly. Like she's like hiding it, but then, of course at the end, And I think that also works because it's not the sexist thing of like trying to bring one of the women down or like make them somehow seem lesser. Like they begrudgingly respect each other the whole time, and in the end they actually do. And I can somehow actually buy that even Cameron Diaz forgives her for what she did because she also says, you won, like I'm sorry, like, let me help you, I concede. And I think that works. Like it doesn't turn into this like bitch fight. Like I mean, they almost get into a physical altercation in this like bathroom at I think the baseball stadium.
Can we talk about this bathroom because like it is one of the funniest scenes because like there's all these other women in the bathroom who are basically like cheering them on and like are down on Julia Roberts, and I'm just looking at this bathroom scene and like how many people are in this bathroom? Like how do you and why? Like, if you're not peeing, like, there's a line in front of that. Am I missing something? Is this like a baseball stadium type thing?
I mean, if you've I've been in the women's bathroom during like halftime break of a football stadium, and it's full. Like, women do watch the sports, and women's bathrooms are always way fuller than
the bathroom is so full you can hardly walk. It just felt like a whole lot of people in that bathroom.
Oh no, that's what it's like.
All right, so you're saying this is realistic to portrayal of bathrooms. I think
so, like especially if there's maybe like one big bathroom if it's an older stadium, which it is because it's Wrigley Field, right? So I feel like it's that's what it's like, especially if there's just basically older, like they have bad crowd management, so everyone stands in line where people are trying to watch that. Like, don't, like, trust me, it's horrible. And that's why you end up waiting. So bad crowd
management gives us this scene.
Yeah, it would happen. And yes, everyone would also be, like, cheering this on. They're, like, getting a bonus boxing match, presumably, which they don't, because then,
they basically go like cat fight, and everybody starts looking, and it's
which is also fun because that also never seems to be really played for the male gaze, right? There's a male gaze cat fight where it's hard if women fight, and it's just, no, this would get really fucking ugly, and it would not be sexy, and all the other women are just out for blood. Like, this would be serious. This would not be hair pulling. This would be, like, punching each other in the nose, right? So, again, it doesn't happen. It's avoided. One of the other funniest things with this is also definitely when Julia Roberts finally confesses her love. Cameron Diaz sees, which sort of sets this whole sequence off. And then he runs after his fiance. She runs after him and then calls Rupert Everett again. And he's like, so who's running after you, right? Which is also kind of like, she's clearly starting to slip out of it. But, and I think also Rupert Everett, whenever, like, I love, again, he's the gay person is the sane person in the movie, right? He's sort of out of the chaos of, like, the heteronormative like everyone is going crazy, love triangle kind of thing, because whenever she calls him, he's like having a nice dinner party.
Those scenes are pretty, like the reading, the book reading is so funny.
Reading? Is it an erotic poetry reading of some, or book reading of some sort?
It's just so quote unquote, like it's so cultured. It just feels so like out of a Nora Ephron movie, right? Like he's sitting over there in his Nora Ephron movie, and now he's coming into this craziness. Although I have to say, Dermot Mulroney is actually kind of very calm center to this as well, because he asks the right questions, right? When Rupert Everett shows up and there's a scene in the car where he's asking, wait, from the way you've described them, I always assumed that he was gay. And he says like, oh yeah, I just pretend to be gay to get women. I'm like, oh, I mean, it's funny because he's gay, but also that's a horrible thing to do. So like, however, like, and Dermot Mulroney is like very skeptical of the whole thing. He was like, this is weird.
I think, he's clearly calm, but also he is also emotionally confused. Like he doesn't lead her on in like on purpose, but he clearly is like suddenly confronted with this, person he's close to or has been very close to, and he admits this is sort of getting out of the way for him, and he's sort of flirty with her, and the heartbreaking boat scene where I think this is the architectural tour. Like also we need to talk about this being Chicago and them actually using Chicago very well, because also another cliche, like it's not the go-to, like she comes from New York to go to Chicago, right? As for once it's a rom-com set somewhere that's not New York. And they're in the boat tour that you can take on the river to, I think that's the architectural tour that I've also done, and and it's this moment where he sings The Way You Look Tonight to her, because it's their song, and she sort of misses that moment of like telling him then.
Which is also very on the nose, because like going under the bridge, and like then he says that the moment is gone, and then the moment is gone. It's visually pretty. Oh yeah, I guess I see what they're doing, but also it does set it up, and it is again structurally. Whoa. It just got dark here. I don't know what happened. You could probably not see it, but I just look. The light just went away somehow. There's enough lighting. We're gonna keep going. But the way that this kind of then propels the rest of the movie again, and what I want to talk about is the various singing scenes, because this movie is kind of like, it hinges on various singing scenes, like somebody sings to somebody. It's Cameron Diaz at the karaoke, right about 25 minutes into the movie. Then it is pretty much the almost at the middle of the movie is the famous scene that we need to talk about, where Rupert Everett starts singing, and then kind of like on the downbeat, it is the singing of The Way You Look Tonight. So every kind of moment that propels the movie into a different I guess state is a song.
There's a fourth one, and it's right before she actually tells him he loves him, which is the cousins singing after inhaling helium.
Oh yeah, right. Yes,
which is sort of random. You could even go like this.
You could even go like, if you want to look at the structural, it starts with a song, because there's the kind of like Busby Berkeley type 1960s song that's actually filmed women singing or lip syncing to a song, and then the song at the end, which Rupert Everett basically says like, and then the band comes in, the song that they dance to. So I'm just wondering why nobody has made a musical yet.
Maybe I feel like now I'm making this up, but I feel like I've read something that someone is trying to do this. But yeah, so the key musical number, I think, is the one that everyone remembers, is in the restaurant. I actually looked this up when I went to Chicago in the spring. Apparently it doesn't exist anymore, unfortunately, but it's like the seafood restaurant, because there's like lobsters in it.
That's the best part. The waiters with the lobster
I say
hands.
A little prayer, because he makes up this absolutely harebrained story of how they met in like an insane asylum, and Dionne Warwick was there, like, or not Dionne Warwick, it was just a drag queen. It's super campy, but it's still enough to make Dermot Mulroney jealous for a moment, which is also set up to be, even though Rupert Everett so overdoes it. But yeah, everyone sings a Say a Little Prayer. And it's, It's
Which
just
is
fun.
interesting because it starts off as like a little thing that he does that's kind of like in reality, and then the moment that the music stops being diegetic, you're like, oh, we're kind of like in a heightened reality now. Like this is because it's a movie where the rest of it is where everybody jumps in, and it's just a fun scene. And I think I vaguely remember that people were confused by this scene being in the movie because it was, well, not a musical, and then this all of a sudden happens. But yeah, it really works for this movie.
Yeah, and again, I think that what's also like another thing that isn't musical would also strike me, like we keep coming back to this, that you can say fuck once in a movie without getting an R rating. But it's
Well
like,
used in this one.
very well
Comically,
used, because
very
it's
well
like
used.
Rupert Everett comes into town, it's like, why is he coming? Well, he just came here to fuck me. And it's like, okay.
It's so good because it's unexpected, but it's
Yeah.
of course kind of unexpected because like you can't use more than one if you want to have an R. It's
And
perfectly delivered. And it's
and they
sort of
try
it's so weirdly
to,
delivered that you like hear it and like, wait, did she actually just say that? I'm like, wow.
and it's like, and apparently because she also like the rule usually also is if you use fuck to actually mean fuck and not of the 50 other ways you can use that word, it would get you an R rating, and they had to make a plea for this movie to go back to it, I think PG-13 that it is now, even though it's in there, and apparently we're successful in it. But yeah, it's still pretty
I love
striking
that. I
when she
love
says
that these
fuck
ratings
means
bodies have their
fuck.
priorities straight. That's
Yeah,
obviously the
yeah,
most
it's like
important thing.
it's straight, yeah. Because if Rupert Everett had said it about fucking another man, this would have gotten R rating immediately. But like, it's in there, and it definitely fits the whole like her desperation to a certain point of like trying to sell the story of like suddenly the very obviously gay Rupert Everett is her boyfriend, to make him jealous, and it's just like, yeah.
Which is something she comes up with on the spot, right? He's not
Yeah.
there to do this. This is not a part of the plan. She
He
just kind of like
plays
realizes that,
into
yeah. This is the other
and
thing. What really works about this is because it's not a thing that they're planning kind of nefariously. You'll be there. Like, because this is the thing, we've discussed this with other movies where like pretending to be or with someone or into someone, and it never really quite sits right. This works because she starts it, and it's her fault that this starts, but he basically leans into it to a point where it makes her uncomfortable, which then makes it funny again, and you go like, well, yeah, okay, they like the power
and
balance is both of them.
because he's also never in favor of this, right? He's constantly the voice of reason telling her it's not gonna work, just, let it, but he's sort of still supportive in the way of like, I guess you have to do this to figure it out on your own, and like surprises her and finds her passed out after death by minibar, which is and you can just tell it's like her increasing desperation trying to break two people up who don't want to be broken up, right? Even that moment when she thinks she succeeded and it's now their wedding day and everyone has this massive brunch, and she goes to her and figures out, no, they actually went. Like, and then this is after she had already like set up this whole scheme of like sending this email in her his future father-in-law's name.
Yeah, in the office, which I tried. I watched this again this morning, and I'm trying to. I tried to wrap my head. Wait, what exactly are the? How is she trying to do
I've
this?
seen this. Okay, I didn't say this going in. I've seen this movie easily 50 times, and I'm not making this up. So what is happening is that the whole thing is he's the sports reporter, but like he's been doing it for so long. He's in this he's like almost 30, right? I mean, he also looks older.
28.
But and he's still doing a job that, I think everyone kind of agrees he's maybe grown out of and could have a better paying job, but he's not doing it because he loves the one he has. But he's marrying into a family of like a sports magnate, essentially. Like there's a scene at Wrigley Field, and it's clear
they own the White Sox, right? That's what they're saying.
They own, I think so, and other like, I think sports, like it obviously would be very, very easy for his future father-in-law to set him up with a very cushy job within sports journalism or sports something or other. But he's obviously too proud to take it, which I guess is valid, but like he's getting married. It's for him to sustain this like low paying job. His then fiance even says like she would drop out of college because they would constantly have to travel. And it is it seems very unfair for her to maybe have to do that, even though it's her own choice. But you also see that this is actually one of the things where, you know, maybe he could get a little nudge from someone and say, maybe it's you made this choice, you're getting married, your life is changing, like maybe you don't have to cling to this other thing this much. Like nobody is expecting him to change careers, right? Anyway, so this is sort of the thing, and obviously this has come up in conversation. He's stubborn, he doesn't want this, and his fiance is also not pushing him to, which is again one of the things we like about her in a way, because it's like she's not trying to change him. But anyway, so I think Julia Roberts' character goes into, like, she says she just needs to write some emails. So she's at a computer of his future father-in-law's, like, in this company, in this big office, and sends out an email to his current boss saying, hey, I think, offer him something, or like, we don't know the exact details, but basically pretends to be his future father-in-law, to sending an email to his current boss saying, hey, you know, why don't you let him go? Let's set him up with a nice deal here. And then obviously his boss, thinking this is a genuine email, is fair enough to like email him and go, maybe you should know what you're marrying into here, right? And this is how he finds out. But then obviously later finds out his father-in-law didn't do this, his fiancée didn't do this, was Julia Roberts. Which is one of those things that I think only works nowadays, because like, I don't know what this would have been like even then with like Microsoft Exchange. Like, what was the system admin situation at this company that she uses someone else's laptop?
I love the insert of the computer screen where she just clicks and it just says email, as if like, yeah, sure. You just click in and it's email, and that's that with that wonderfully like, 90s looking Mac computer. Yeah.
Yeah, like even then, again, this is literally what my dad does. He does Microsoft Exchange system admin. No company in 1997 would have had a setup where you just use any random computer within this company and it can send emails to someone else.
I mean, it was like it was his office, right? And it might have been that he is old and he doesn't want to use a password. I can kind of buy that.
Yeah, but like it's still, she would still need his passport, because usually you could have logged into these on a guest account and then, you know, access.
Yeah, but like for the purposes of the movie, I buy
but like,
it.
It still feels like one of those things that work, because the way this email gets out, she actually has second thought, but then thoughts about it, and then, however, he tells the secretary to send out a bunch of saved drafts, and this is how it then,
because she doesn't send it, but she saves it and she doesn't delete it, which I honestly don't know why you wouldn't just delete it, but okay, like, again,
because then also she risks like being exposed of like this weird email is sitting in his drafts and he could have seen it at any point in time. But anyway, again, this is supposed to make her a bit more likable, of like not just actually having second thoughts.
She has these she basically talks to herself. Why am I sending? Should I send this? I shouldn't send this. I should save it. I should, like, that whole conversation. And in the end decides to save. I mean, like, if she's emotionally in that weird state, okay, maybe we can buy that as well. Fine.
Yeah. But this is what happens. And then it gets out, and then this is when it looks like he will actually break up, and then instead goes to his wedding brunch, because he clearly still clings to this, and then it all unravels fully. But yeah, anyway.
At which point
we need to...
At which point then Julia Roberts like confesses her love. But you wanted to go before that.
I feel like I'm still like there's a few other things on my list, but like the ditzy cousins, can we briefly talk about that? The Southern cousins, because they're also like, we need to talk about how every part in this movie, almost every part, is an actor that probably got famous for something else later. So And the cousins are two of them. They're Carrie, Preston, and Rachel Griffiths, and both
Yeah.
of them had very big parts in like early mid 2000s TV, and still continue to be prominent TV actresses, I think. So Carrie Preston was had a bigger part in True Blood. She currently has a big part, and she has her own show now. She's what is that called? Elspeth something or
Oh,
other.
she is Elspeth. Is she really?
Yeah,
I did
and
not make that connection. Wow.
no, I do know her, and it's funny to me because like she's one of those faces in like, you know, formative TV years for me that would pop up in things, and now
Yeah.
sort of
She just
like
looks
notice that
different.
she's
I mean,
doing
like
this.
the hair.
Yeah,
I mean, the
or
90s hair makes her look
very,
very different.
and she's very young still,
Yeah,
right?
fair.
Yeah. And so she's also married to another actor that was constantly on TV in the early mid 2000s, Michael Emerson, who's like the villain in Lost,
Oh,
and
yeah, I know him. Yeah.
you know, like in Person
One
of
of those
Interest,
character faces where you're like, oh, him again. He's never
total
quite
character
the
actor.
nice guy. Yeah,
And the fun thing for me was when I was in actually participated in the actors and writers strikes like last year. Like I went to a few picket lines, and they were always there every day. So they're clearly based in New York and lived together in New York. They're still married. Every day, the two of them showed up on the picket line. And I never quite found a moment to say, hey, both of you have been on my TV since I was like, you know, little. But I was like, okay, you're sound, right? A, you've been married forever. B, you're constantly in the picket line. You're here. Like, and I think he's now actually joining her in her show as well.
Oh, that should be fun.
Yeah.
And yeah, Rachel Griffiths, who
Rachel
I've seen
Griffiths.
pop up in things, but I
She
haven't
had
really
a big
followed
part
her
in
closely.
6 Feet Under is one of the
That's
shows
where
I've
I've seen her, but
her
I've never finished that
Yeah.
show. So yeah,
Yeah, I did finish,
maybe I
but
should.
yeah.
Yeah, but they're very funny. They're very much basically set up as these typical ditzy Southerners, and it's just kind of it's a fun part. They are part of the singing scene. Also, we need to talk about the parents. The mom is Susan Sullivan, who in the 90s, I think at that point in time, is also the waspy mom in Dharma and Greg, who basically is
I
this
was gonna
very
say, wasn't she
similar
always the
character. Yeah.
waspy mom?
Like she's never not that character in the
Yeah.
90s, and it just always works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I forget what the father is, Emmett Walsh. Like I feel like it feels like one of those guys I've also seen in things without being actually.
Yeah,
but like
he's super. He's one of those character people who keep popping up. I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but yeah.
What I also like about the ditzy cousins is that it's once again one of those, it could be a very bad trope, and it sort of is, but at the same time, they're very unashamed about being sort of sluts, and like, you know, they're owning it in a way, which feels like we're not necessarily making fun of them as much as like, okay, we're this way, and we're kind of cool, and we're kind of like, you know, rolling with everything, and there's a scene from one of them, like Rachel Griffiths, gets stuck on the ice sculpture. Just like it's a kind of a joke, but like I think highlights sort of the humor of this film on moments where, you know, it was an ice sculpture of like, what was it, Adonis? Like it was, yeah. She, you know, she gets.
I think we need. This is the inspiration
ice
for Hot
sculpture's
Frosty.
penis.
Just like let's put that out there.
Say. Imagine he had come to life because anyway, no, that's the porn version of Hot Frosty. Anyway, yeah, no, I think and it's once again something super campy. They're just really campy characters, but in a very unashamed way. I think it's very fun.
I think the thing that is very interesting about this movie is there are the way that it kind of makes you. It's almost. I'm reaching here. Like it's not because in Psycho, halfway through the movie, spoiler alert, our like main character that we identify with dies, and then you identify with the bad guy, and in not the same way, but kind of the same way, Julia Roberts is the bad guy, which he admits in the movie from the beginning, and so we're kind of like seeing things from the perspective of the bad guy, but that also kind of means that the antagonists are kind of all the good guys, and that's why there isn't really a quote unquote bad guy that's not Julia Roberts in this movie. So all of these characters kind of are likable, and they are, because usually you would assume these waspy rich people are portrayed as being stuck up and like your racist, sexist, problematic, out of touch people, but they're not, and that's another. They are part of the singing scene, right? There's a really funny part of that at the end. It's really interesting the way that literally this movie doesn't just flip the ending on its head, but the whole idea of like who's supposed to be the person you're rooting for, which is really quite subversive and kind of fun.
Yeah, and I think it's just why it works so well, and why I don't understand why it's been that badly received, or not badly, but like we talked about this, has like a 6.7
6.4 on IMDb, which is low.
Like, no, yeah, I actually forgot to look up the reviews, but like I don't know, man. Like, I've seen this. I don't know why exactly I've seen it this much. I think one of the answers is I always kind of liked it, and it was one that I sort of taped from TV and then would sometimes put on. I have, for some reason, vivid backgrounds of like cleaning my room to this when I was like 14. And thinking, oh, she's 28, she's an adult.
That's, yeah. And, I mean, that's the thing that's different. Like, the way that these people look at 28 and, like, the way that they're accomplished in their careers at that point in time just doesn't feel true for people, like, the generation after, right? It's just weird. And, like, her whole job, like, she's a food writer, but she's also on a book tour. By the way, weird food writer. Like, the whole idea of like, the food critic, like, the food critic trope is that you go to the restaurant, they kind of don't know who's coming to eat the food. And here the first scene is that the kitchen is really, really active in order to serve her the best version of the food, because she's the famous food critic who's there. And then we kind of like drop that there's not reference to that. That's not what her point in life is in this movie, is that she's a food writer. That's kind of dropped even in the restaurant scene with the lobsters, which would have been a perfect moment to insert that goes away.
Yeah. And now, obviously, like that is one of those movies for me where at some point, oh my god, it happened to me. The protagonist of the movie is now younger than me, right? And there must have been a gap when I didn't watch it as much as I had, probably also with the pandemic. At some point, we sort of remote watched this together, but
it's like there was 2-3 years ago.
For me. Yeah. There's a moment for me where I was like, fuck, like she's. But then it clicked, because like, again, as a teenager, these were adults. Cameron Diaz was also an adult for me. And of course they are from that perspective. But now I'm like, of course she's freaking out. She's 28. She probably hasn't been dating much. She was very emotionally unavailable. So it sounds like she hasn't really been in a long-term relationship. So it's the cliche sense of like, fuck, I'm almost 30.
It's like the Friends cliche from the 90s, right?
Yeah. And I mean, this still exists. Like, that pressure still exists. And it's like, oh my god, I need to make this work, because this is the one person I ever had like a proper emotional connection to, and I sort of fucked that up, and now I need to force this, and it doesn't work, thankfully. Like, but yeah. So yeah, the reviews of the Rotten Tomato stuff is more at 75%, which makes a bit more sense. There's a few reviews that
I mean, the thing about the IMDb ratings, I think it's just people. Like, a lot of people who were dragged into this movie by their significant others because it's like a date movie, or who were made to watch this on television or on a rental. I kind of get that. But there are other movies in the romantic comedy genre that, this is to me one of the trifecta of the Julia Roberts 90s rom-coms. It's Pretty Woman, it's The Runaway Bride, and it's this one. Those are the three that I always kind of think of when I think of Julia Roberts.
Notting Hill.
And fair, yeah, Notting Hill. So it's 4.
More than Runaway Bride. I think, like, Notting Hill should come before Runaway Bride, even though I'm a Runaway Bride apologist, so we should do it.
I guess we're going to have to do Runaway Bride at some point, but yeah, I guess Notting Hill.
Runaway Bride, also for some reason, one of those I've seen way too often.
I actually haven't. I never quite entirely know what happens in that movie, so maybe we do need to do that. But it's of that canon, right? It's definitely, and I would not rate it any less than any of these movies, and it doesn't seem to be quite punching through, which I think is probably because it's the non-typical ending. I think people who like rom-coms, right? The people who don't like rom-coms aren't going to like it. The people who do like rom-coms for what they are and for their predictability also aren't all going to like this.
And maybe it's also, again, the type of humor. Again, is super campy, and to the point where I was surprised when I found out the screenwriter isn't gay. Like, honestly, like, it would have tracked. He's not. But, like, I don't know. It would have made sense to me because it's so against sort of that convention. And again, the gay character being the only sane, more level-headed person in this. And also getting to be over the top in other ways, but like, and again, like, he has his shit together. Like, again, he's like, he is dinner parties and book readings, and she's completely scrambling.
Again, he's in the Nora Ephron movie. It's really kind of fun. There has, like, people have often, like, discussed this idea of doing kind of like a Rosencrantz and Guildenstern kind of thing on the romantic comedy movie, typically like starring Catherine Hahn, like from like the 2000s, which honestly, I think there is a movie to be had that is like the kind of Nora Ephron movie that he's starring in while this is going on, like on the other side. Yeah. That would be a really fun movie to watch.
Yeah. But yeah, anyway, I feel like it's just, yeah, it's underrated because I think this is like I don't know what else to say about this. It's just like the performances are great. Every cast. Again, we haven't talked about Paul Giamatti yet because, like, for some reason I always think, because I've seen it so much, but like, Paul Giamatti is in this as like someone delivering room service, the hotel, room service person.
And she's sitting outside smoking after Dermot Mulroney has started to leave the room when he's breaking up with Cameron Diaz.
Yeah, and she clearly feels like shit because she succeeded, but it doesn't feel good, right? And so she's smoking in the hotel hallway, which even in 1997 is already forbidden. It feels like a very Carrie Bradshaw moment before Sex and the City, I must say, by a year. So it feels like in that speed. Also, Sarah Jessica Parker auditioned for this, by the way. So
I mean, that makes sense. It's like the same that as you said, Drew Barrymore auditioned for the Cameron Diaz part. Like, I think there's a bunch of people in that orbit who obviously at some stage would have auditioned for it.
And Paul Giamatti comes by and he's like, you can't smoke here. And then they have this very genuine moment of like, and where he's like, my grandmother always used to say, this too shall pass.
Yeah. That's, and Paul Giamatti is just, again, like, I like Paul Giamatti in almost everything. Like, he also feels like he is weird in the right kind of way. There was, I don't remember what show, there was a show. It was like a cable show or something where at some point Paul Giamatti, like, for the joke of the show, sat in like basically a dumpster for the whole of the show as people were discussing what was in the dumpster. And in the end, it turns out it's, spoiler alert, Paul Giamatti. And I'm like, Paul Giamatti took time out of his day for this dumb joke, sat in a dumpster for like an hour. Like, this man is just low key a hero of comedy.
I think his whole, like, didn't he win like an Oscar now and then went to like In-N-Out Burger, wasn't there something? Which
I mean, he's just exactly that kind of person to the point where like my touch point for Paul Giamatti is Sideways and of course John Adams. So every time I see an American. Every time I see an American history movie or TV series, like I recently did with the one that Michael Douglas did, and John Adams isn't played by Paul Giamatti, at this point I just think it's wrong.
Yeah, I missed it when it came out. I tried to watch it. I'm in the middle of teaching a class on the American Revolution pop culture. But once again, because it was like a block class and I have very limited time, I didn't manage to fit that in. But it's always on my radar as one of the, like, actually pop culture depictions. If Hamilton wouldn't exist still, I would have put John Adams.
This felt, before Hamilton, that was the one that the historians all would talk about. Like, oh, this is the one that, can show people and, like, it's not horrible. And it was fun.
Yeah, I'm doing the Patriot because I need to expose my students to this terrible film.
Oh my.
But anyway, Paul G. I mean, again, like the performances are great. It's also one of those, again, the the mid-budget film, just incredibly well executed. Of like, it's shot on location and uses Chicago super well. Again, with the boat, with the restaurant, with the hotel that the wedding is in, like one of the big hotels in Chicago. It's sort of all there. The baseball stadium. It's like, you know,
it's beautifully shot. Like not in an overt way. There are other movies where you see like, oh yeah, they really, but in a very, I know what I'm doing. This is kind of craftsmanship. Beautiful anamorphic 35 millimeter film. Julia Roberts looks great in every scene. Dermot Mulroney, Cameron Diaz, all of them, Rupert Everett, they just look like they've been styled 3 seconds before they stepped onto screen, which obviously is true, but also
that is not
not
right?
unreal,
like,
right?
Not natural.
It has an old Hollywood kind of feel in that sense.
Yeah. It has a great soundtrack, like not just the songs that they're singing, but then also like the way you look tonight, and like the versions of that's playing. There's some other great songs in this. I think it's a James Newton Howard score.
It is, yeah.
I think, yeah. So, and I mean, that's not nobody either. So it's just like it all comes together like super well. Like it's, you know, and then the twist ending is like cool. More, it should be more.
Which I think is a thing that we. Yeah, sorry,
Yeah, no, I think
this twist ending is obviously, we talked about how it kind of like was a response to test audiences because they didn't want her to get together with John Corbett. The thing that really works for me about this ending is that thematically it is the perfect ending to this. You don't get rewarded because you basically just screwed up, and that means you're gonna have to like your character arc isn't done yet, right? You kind of need to dig yourself out of that hole. But that doesn't mean that you don't deserve friendship. That doesn't mean that you don't deserve to have a good time. And in the end, Rupert Everett like shows up and shows her that. Like, and she didn't even. It kind of like she starts the movie with one best friend, the one that's getting married and is in danger of losing him, but then kind of makes. At the end of it, it's kind of all right, and she clearly has Rupert Everett has as her best friend. Like the friendship is in the title of the movie, and it kind of carries this movie. So the message is, love is fine, but friendship really also matters, and you shouldn't disregard that.
And it's about growing up to a certain degree, right? Because they were very close when they were much younger, and they have all the shared history.
Like they would have been like 19.
Nobody erases this history, but like they've both clearly moved on with their lives, and have different lives now, and you know. And I mean, at that point, you can see them still get together, and like clearly now that, you know, Cameron Diaz, they made up and everything, and we'll be fine. But they also live in different cities, and that's just what life is like.
I don't know, they might meet every 2 years, like at the Hamptons or something, you know, whatever.
She's also just clearly clinging to like a different version of her life or her youth with this, and not just him as a person. And it's just,
Should we do fake taglines?
Yeah, so the real taglines, there's 4, and some of them are oddly descriptive. So there's, Julianne fell in love with her best friend the day he decided to marry someone else. It's like, okay, well, I got that from my best friend's wedding, I guess.
That's the pitch, basically.
Michael and Julianne have been best friends for years, but they were never more than that until he popped a question to someone else. And like, yeah, again, like this is well enough titled that I can get the sense that anyway. And then there's 2, it's about finding the love of your life and deciding what to do about it, which is sort of this. It's like there is an option where you just let go. And a comedy about finding your heart and losing your head. I feel that's actually nailing it, sort of. Yeah,
I like that one. All right. Do you have a fake one? My fake one is let the one that got away get away.
Mm-hmm. Mine is just 2 shall pass.
I feel like we grew up during this podcast now. Like I feel much more adult about everything.
Yeah, sure.
It's gonna last until probably next episode. So
10 minutes. All right.
And that is my best friend's wedding.